The obsidian halls of the Galactic Council trembled as Ambassador Zethkar's forearm slammed against the crystalline podium. His voice, a mixture of clicks and electronic pulses, cut through the chamber like a blade. The humans must be contained, now. 700 delegates from across the galaxy turned their various appendages, optical sensors and consciousness fields toward the towering insectoid figure. The silence that followed was deafening, the kind that precedes either revelation or catastrophe. High Chancellor Vexira, her serpentine form coiled around the central throne, spoke with the weight of 10,000 years. Ambassador Zethkar, your species has made this claim before. The Terran Federation has been peaceful for 3 centuries. Their colonies are agricultural. Their fleets are minimal. What evidence do you present? Zethkar's compound eyes glittered with something that might have been fear. Chancellor, with respect, you speak of what humans do when they sleep. I have seen what they become when they wake. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of languages, hisses, chirps, telepathic bursts, and electronic harmonics. Only one voice cut through the chaos, a calm, measured tone that belonged to Ambassador Sarah Chen, humanity's sole representative in this vast assembly. If I may, she said, standing slowly from her modest seat in the lower tier, I'd like to understand what my colleague means by wake. Every sensor in the room focused on her. Sarah was unremarkable by galactic standards, bipedal, carbon-based, standing barely 2 meters tall. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and her brown eyes held a patience that seemed almost infinite. To most delegates, she looked exactly like what humanity claimed to be, a peaceful gardener species that had stumbled into space travel almost by accident. Zethkar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. You know exactly what I mean, human. I'm afraid I don't, Sarah replied, her voice steady. Perhaps you could enlighten us. The Cathari ambassador shifted in his biomechanical throne. General Hrex had fought in 17 galactic conflicts and bore the scars of each one across his chitinous hide. When he spoke, his words carried the authority of experience. 3 months ago, my deep space patrol encountered a human civilian transport that had wandered into contested space near the void barrier. The vessel was damaged, life support failing, standard rescue protocol. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in her posture. Go on. The transport carried 200 humans, families, children, elderly. When my ships approached, they broadcast a standard distress signal. Grateful for rescue. Peaceful intentions. Rex paused, his optical cluster focusing directly on Sarah. That was the lie. The chamber fell silent again. Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm. General, I'm not sure what you're suggesting. I'm suggesting, Rex's voice dropped to a growl, that when my boarding party detected hostile signatures approaching our position, a Devourer scout fleet, those same grateful, peaceful humans underwent a transformation that defies every psychological profile we have of your species. Chancellor Vexira leaned forward. Explain. Rex activated a holographic display. The image showed a star field dotted with ships. As they watched, 6 massive vessels emerged from hyperspace, the unmistakable biometallic forms of the Devourers, a species that had consumed 17 civilizations before the galaxy had united to contain them beyond the void barrier. My squadron consisted of 4 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers. The Devourer scout fleet numbered 6 vessels, each one larger than our flagship. Standard protocol dictated immediate retreat. Rex's mandibles clicked. The human transport captain disagreed. The hologram zoomed in on a relatively tiny vessel, the human transport. Sarah recognized the design, a converted freight hauler, barely armed, carrying civilian families to a new agricultural colony. The human captain, Rex continued, requested permission to assist with our tactical situation. I informed him that evacuation was our priority, not engagement. His response was illuminating. Sarah felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. She had a terrible suspicion about where this was heading. He said, and I quote, General, with respect, you've never seen humans fight for our children. Today is not the day you want to learn. The display showed the human transport suddenly changing course. Instead of fleeing with Rex's fleet, it accelerated directly toward the Devourer formation. Suicide run, muttered the Altarian trade representative. That's what I thought. Rex agreed. I ordered my ships to cover their escape vector, assuming they would realize their error and break off. They did not break off. The hologram continued its replay. The human transport, moving at impossible speeds, opened fire on the lead Devourer vessel. But this wasn't the wild, desperate shooting of panicked civilians. The weapons fire was precise, methodical, targeting specific weak points in the biometallic hull with surgical accuracy. How? Whispered the Andromedan delegate. That's what I wondered, Rex said. A civilian transport shouldn't have that kind of firepower, that kind of targeting capability. But as I watched, I began to understand. They weren't civilians anymore. The display zoomed in on the transport's bridge through some kind of enhanced sensors. Sarah's blood ran cold as she saw what Rex had recorded. The bridge crew, grandparents, parents, even teenagers, worked with the fluid efficiency of a military unit that had trained together for decades. Their movements were precise, economical, deadly. The adults, Rex continued, had taken positions I had never seen before. The elderly human at the navigation console was plotting attack vectors that would make our tactical AI weep with envy. The children were manning weapon stations with the calm focus of seasoned warriors. Sarah closed her eyes. She knew what came next. In 17 minutes. Rex's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. That transport disabled 4 Devourer vessels and completely destroyed 2 others. Not damaged, vaporized. When my tactical officer asked how this was possible, the human captain's final transmission was, "Tell the Council that Earth's children made it home safely. That's all they need to know." The hologram flickered and died. The chamber remained, silent for a long moment. Finally, Chancellor Vexira spoke. "Ambassador Chen, your response?" Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the gazes of delegates from species that had fought wars for millions of years. These beings had seen the rise and fall of empires, had witnessed the birth and death of stars, had survived conflicts that spanned galaxies. And in this moment, she could see fear in their eyes. "I'm sure it was a harrowing experience for everyone involved," she said carefully. "General Herex, I'm glad your ships and the transport made it home safely. Sometimes when people are protecting their families, they find reserves of strength they didn't know they had." "Reserves of strength," Zethkar's voice dripped with disbelief. "Is that what you call it when a species transforms from peaceful farmers into perfect killing machines in the space of a heartbeat?" Sarah's patience never wavered, but something else flickered behind her eyes. Something that made several delegates unconsciously shift away from her. "My species has always been protective of our young, Ambassador. I don't think that should surprise anyone." "Protective," General Herex repeated slowly. "Ambassador Chen, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. How old are you?" Sarah blinked, seemingly confused by the non sequitur. 47 standard years. "And in those 47 years, how many conflicts has your species been involved in?" "None, General. As you noted, we've been at peace for 3 centuries. Rex leaned forward. "Then explain to me how civilian humans, farmers, teachers, children, executed military maneuvers that my own tactical academy uses as examples of perfect combat coordination." The chamber held its collective breath. Sarah's response was soft, almost gentle. "I really couldn't say, General. Perhaps they watched historical documentaries?" The laugh that escaped Zethkar's breathing apparatus was bitter and sharp. "Historical documentaries. Chancellor, I submit that this is exactly the problem. The humans speak of their military history as if it were ancient mythology. They build museums instead of monuments. They write songs about war instead of preparing for it." "And you see this as threatening?" Chancellor Vexira asked. "I see this as terrifying," Zethkar replied. A species that can forget how to wage war is one thing. A species that chooses to forget while retaining the capability is something else entirely. Sarah's voice remained steady. Ambassador, I think you're reading too much into a single incident. Desperate people sometimes surprise themselves. Single incident? Zethkar activated his own holographic display. Incident number 47 Alpha. Human freighter crew repels Slavers Guild raid with improvised weapons. Incident 63 Beta. Human research team on Kepler 442b defeats armed mercenaries using scientific equipment. Incident 89 Gamma. Human medical ship somehow overcomes 3 pirate vessels while carrying only healing supplies. The list continued, each entry accompanied by tactical analyses that grew more disturbing with each example. Sarah listened impassively, but her hands, folded in her lap, had begun to tremble almost imperceptibly. In each case, Zethkar continued, humans faced with violence responded with a level of tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency that suggests extensive military training. Yet when questioned afterward, they claim no such training. They speak of instinct and protecting what matters. Chancellor Vexira's serpentine head swayed slowly. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? I propose that humanity's peaceful nature is not evolution. It's choice, and choices can change. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Sarah finally stood, her movement drawing every eye in the chamber. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. I understand these incidents have caused concern, but I would remind you that in each case humans were defending themselves or others from unprovoked attack. We didn't seek these conflicts. That's exactly the point, Zethkar's voice rose. You don't seek conflict. You simply excel at it when it finds you. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, there was something different in her tone, not threatening but somehow final. Ambassador, I think there's a misunderstanding. Here. You seem to believe that because my people can fight, we will fight. That because we can be dangerous, we are dangerous. Are you saying you're not? Sarah smiled, and for just an instant several delegates felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. I'm saying that a species that chooses peace despite being capable of war is not the same as a species that is peaceful because it's incapable of war. The difference should comfort you, not frighten you. Comfort? General Rex leaned forward. Ambassador, how does the existence of a species with hidden military capabilities comfort anyone? Because, Sarah's voice took on a tone that was almost maternal, we chose to be your neighbors instead of your conquerors. Every day for 300 years we have made that choice. Every day for 300 years we have chosen to tend gardens instead of battlefields. The chamber fell silent. In that silence, a terrible understanding began to dawn on the assembled delegates. They had been asking the wrong question. The question wasn't whether humans could fight. The question was what would happen if they ever chose to stop choosing peace. Ambassador Chen gathered her materials with efficient movements. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the chamber's entrance. I'll be sure to pass along your concerns to Earth Central, she said pleasantly, though I suspect they'll find them as puzzling as I do. After all, why would anyone fear a species that has spent 3 centuries proving its dedication to peace? As the chamber doors closed behind her, no one spoke for a full minute. Finally, Chancellor Vexira's voice broke the silence. Emergency session. All military advisors. Now. But as the delegates filed out, none of them noticed the small recording device that had been quietly documenting their entire conversation. And none of them saw Ambassador Chen pause in the corridor outside, speaking quietly into her personal communicator. Priority Alpha transmission to Earth Central. Council session recorded. Operational security may be compromised. Recommend activation of Protocol 7. A pause. Then a response in a voice that carried the same infinite patience as Sarah's, but with an undertone of steel. Protocol 7 confirmed. All assets to stand by. May the garden bloom in peace, Sarah. And, may the gardeners be ready when wolves come calling, she replied. The communicator went dark. Sarah Chen walked calmly down the corridor, her footsteps echoing softly in the vast space station that housed the galaxy's government. Behind her, in the council chamber, delegates continued their emergency discussions, unaware that their every word was being recorded, analyzed, and transmitted across the galaxy to a small blue planet that had been waiting 3 centuries for this exact moment. A planet where gardens bloomed in peaceful silence, tended by a species that remembered everything and forgave nothing, and had never, not once, forgotten how to wage war. Earth hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its surface dotted with vast agricultural zones that fed half the galaxy. From orbit, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a peaceful farming world inhabited by gentle beings who had somehow stumbled into interstellar travel. Dr. Elena Vasquez tended her tomatoes in the morning sun, humming softly as she worked. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking each plant for signs of disease or pest damage. At 73, she was considered one of Earth's premier agricultural scientists, responsible for developing the crop strains that had made human world so valuable to the galactic economy. Beautiful morning, isn't it, Elena? She looked up to see her neighbor Marcus Webb approaching through the maze of garden paths that connected their properties. Marcus was younger, only 55, but his dark skin already showed the comfortable lines of someone who had spent decades working under the sun. In his previous life, he had been a mining engineer. Now he grew the sweetest corn in the sector. Perfect growing weather, Elena agreed. How's your yield looking this season? Outstanding. The new nitrogen-fixing bacteria you developed are working beautifully. Marcus paused at the edge of her plot, running experienced fingers along a tomato vine. Elena, did you hear the news from the council station? Elena's hands stilled for just a moment before continuing their work. What news is that? Sarah transmitted. Last night. Priority Alpha. The words were spoken casually, as if Marcus were commenting on the weather. Elena continued tending her plants, but her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Straighter, more alert. What did our diplomat have to say? The hegemony and the Kethari are asking questions. Smart questions. Elena plucked a ripe tomato and examined it carefully. Questions about what? About why our freighter crews keep surviving impossible odds. About why our research teams never seem to lose personnel to the usual hazards. About why every human vessel that encounters hostile forces somehow manages to come home intact. The tomato in Elena's hand was perfect, red, firm, unblemished. She placed it gently in her basket and reached for another. And what did Sarah tell them? What she always tells them. That we're just lucky. Elena laughed, a warm sound that carried across the garden. Lucky, yes, I suppose that's one way to put it. A new voice joined the conversation. Lucky has nothing to do with it. Both Elena and Marcus turned to see James Park walking toward them along the main path. James was 28, young by the standards of their community, but his eyes held an odd intensity that made him seem older. He taught history at the local school, and the children loved his classes about ancient civilizations. James, Elena said pleasantly, "How are your students today?" "Learning about the Peloponnesian War," James replied. "Fascinating how much military strategy you can teach while discussing ancient history," Marcus chuckled. "Still corrupting young minds with your war stories?" "Someone has to," James said, but his tone was serious. "Elena, Marcus, we need to talk. All of us. Tonight." Elena looked up sharply. "All of us?" "Community gathering. 7 o'clock. Sarah's transmission wasn't just a status update. It was a warning. The three stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken understanding passing between them. Then Elena returned to her tomatoes. "I'll make sure word gets around," she said quietly. "What should I tell people?" "Tell them it's time for a history lesson." That evening, the community center filled with an interesting cross-section of Earth's population. To any outside observer, it would have looked like a typical rural town meeting. Farmers, teachers, engineers, doctors, and retirees gathering to discuss local concerns. Children played quietly in the back while their parents chatted about crop yields and weather patterns. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who ran the local medical clinic, sat next to Roberto Santos, the settlement's chief engineer. Behind them, Sarah Okafor, a retired art teacher, whispered with David Kim, who managed the local communications array. In the back corner, seemingly absorbed in a book, sat Ahmed Hassan, whose official job was running the recycling center, but whose real passion was ancient Earth history. To any galactic observer, they would have appeared to be exactly what they claimed: a community of peaceful humans living simple agricultural lives on a garden world, far from the centers of galactic power. They would have been wrong. James Park stood at the front of the room and waited. The casual conversations gradually died away as people noticed his serious expression. When the room was quiet, he activated a privacy shield generator. Standard technology, nothing suspicious, just ensuring their local discussion wouldn't be overheard. "Thank you all for coming," he began. Sarah Chen transmitted from the council station yesterday. "The situation is developing faster than we anticipated." Elena raised her hand. "How much faster?" "The Cathari have filed an official inquiry. They're requesting access to human educational records, specifically our historical archives." A murmur ran through the crowd. Roberto leaned forward. "What's their justification?" "They claim they want to understand human instinctive responses to crisis situations. They've noticed that our people demonstrate what they call impossible competency under pressure." Dr. Tanaka's voice was carefully neutral. "And our response? Earth Central has agreed to provide limited access to our historical databases, cultural exchange program, very educational." The murmur turned into quiet laughter. Ahmed Hassan looked up from his book. "Which histories are we sharing?" "The usual. Pre-spaceflight conflicts, ancient history, nothing more recent than the 20th century. "Ah," Ahmed nodded. "The sanitized version. The version that explains human creativity, problem-solving, and resilience without explaining human warfare," James confirmed. Marcus stood slowly. At 55, he was one of the older residents, and his voice carried weight when he spoke. "James, how much do they actually know? They know we can fight. They don't know how well, how efficiently, or how quickly we can adapt. They see our defensive capabilities but not our offensive potential. They suspect we're hiding something but can't prove what. And how long do we have before they figure it out?" James was quiet for a moment. "Our analysts estimate 6 months before they develop enough evidence to present formal charges to the council. Maybe less if they get access to the right databases." Elena stood, her elderly frame somehow seeming more substantial in the room's dim lighting. "Then I suppose it's time." "Time for what?" asked Sarah Okafor. "Time to decide whether we keep pretending to be sheep." Elena's voice carried an edge that transformed her from a kindly grandmother into something altogether different. "Or whether we remind the galaxy why the wolves learned to fear us in the first place." The room fell absolutely silent. Parents instinctively moved closer to their children. Even the youngest residents seemed to sense that something fundamental was shifting. James looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. "The choice is ours. We can continue the masquerade, keep playing the role of peaceful farmers who just happen to be surprisingly good at surviving dangerous situations. Earth Central believes we can maintain operational security for perhaps another century. Or," Dr. Tanaka prompted, "or we acknowledge that 3 centuries of voluntary pacifism may be coming to an end. The galactic situation is deteriorating. The devourer containment is failing. The trade wars between the major powers are escalating. And now, multiple species are openly questioning whether humanity's peaceful nature is genuine." Roberto's engineering mind cut straight to the practical implications. "If they discover the truth about our capabilities, what then? Best case scenario? They isolate us, quarantine our worlds, and treat us as a potential threat to be managed. Worst case?" James paused. "They decide we're too dangerous to exist and move to eliminate us before we can become a problem." The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. Lisa Chen, no relation to Ambassador Sarah, was only 16, but she had been listening intently from the children's area. When she spoke, Her young voice carried surprising authority. "Mr. Park, may I ask a question?" "Of course, Lisa. If they're afraid of us now when we've been peaceful for 300 years, how afraid would they be if we actually gave them something to fear?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. James smiled grimly. "That, Lisa, is exactly what we need to decide." Elena walked slowly to the front of the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. When she turned to face the community, the kindly agricultural scientist was gone. In her place stood someone who moved with the fluid confidence of command authority. "I've lived through 93 harvests on this world," she said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "I've raised children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren in these fields. I've taught 3 generations of humans that the greatest strength is the choice not to use it." She paused, looking around the room with eyes that had seen more than any farming colony should require. "But I have also lived long enough to know that sometimes the choice is taken away from you." Marcus stood, his mining engineer's practical nature coming through in his measured words. "Elena's right. We've had 300 years to perfect the art of peaceful living, but we've also had 300 years to perfect other things." "Such as?" prompted David Kim, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Such as making sure that if peace ever fails," Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper, "we'll be very, very good at war." Young Lisa's voice cut through the adult conversation with startling clarity. "Are you saying we're not really farmers?" Elena looked at the teenager with something that might have been pride. "Oh, we're farmers, dear. We grow things, feed people, nurture life." She paused. "We just happen to be very, very good at other things too." "What kind of other things?" This time it was Ahmed Hassan who answered, closing his book and looking up with scholarly precision. "Tell me, Lisa, what do you know about Earth's pre-spaceflight history? I know we had wars, lots of them, but that was before we learned better." Ahmed's smile was gentle but somehow unsettling. "We learned better, yes, but learning better and forgetting everything are 2 different things." Dr. Tanaka, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "The Cathari want to see our educational records. Fine. Let them see how we teach our children about ancient Rome, medieval knights, and 20th century conflicts. Let them read our sanitized histories about human warfare. And when they ask about modern human capabilities," Roberto prompted. "We tell them the truth," Elena said simply. "We are a peaceful, agricultural species that has chosen to focus on nurturing life rather than taking it. Even though we could take it very efficiently if we chose to. Especially because we could take it very efficiently if we chose to." James looked around the room one more time. "So we're agreed? We maintain the masquerade?" The response was unanimous, but it came in the form of subtle nods and small gestures rather than vocal agreement. These were people who understood the value of discretion. As the meeting broke up, families gathered their children and began the quiet walk home through the garden paths. Conversations returned to normal topics: harvest schedules, school projects, maintenance requests. But as Elena walked home alone, she paused at a small memorial garden where simple stone markers remembered those who had died in humanity's last war, 3 centuries ago. The inscription on the central monument was worn but still readable. "They gave their lives so that we might choose peace. May we prove worthy of their sacrifice." Elena touched the stone gently, then continued home. In her cottage, she opened a closet that officially contained gardening equipment. Behind the tools and fertilizer, hidden behind a false wall that looked like stacked seed packages, was a communications array that could reach any point in human space in under 4 hours. Her message was brief. Garden update: seasonal concerns developing. Request advisory on advanced cultivation techniques. Recommend full agricultural readiness protocols. The response came within minutes. Advisory acknowledged. All gardens cleared for enhanced cultivation. Tenders standing by for seasonal transition. May the harvest be bountiful. Elena smiled as she disconnected the array. To any monitoring system, the exchange would look like a routine communication between agricultural settlements. The code words were buried in language so mundane that even sophisticated analysis would miss their significance. But across human space, on dozens of peaceful farming worlds, community leaders received similar messages. And one by one, they began making phone calls, sending emails and activating systems that had waited silently for 300 years. Systems that had been built and maintained by a species that understood the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. As Elena prepared for bed, she looked out her window at the fields where her neighbors worked, raising food that fed billions of beings across the galaxy. Tomorrow they would continue their peaceful lives, tending their gardens and teaching their children about the value of life. But tonight, for the first time in 3 centuries, they would also be cleaning weapons that officially didn't exist, reviewing tactical protocols that were supposedly ancient history, and preparing for a possibility they had hoped would never arise. The sleep of the righteous, it was said, was peaceful. The sleep of the prepared was something else entirely. Admiral Kenji Nakamura officially didn't exist. According to every database in human space, he was Dr. Kenji Nakamura, a botanist specializing in crop rotation on the agricultural world of New Hokkaido. His daily routine involved soil analysis, plant genetics, and optimizing growing conditions for the rice variants that fed 3 sectors. Unofficially, he commanded the Ghost Fleet. Standing in what appeared to be a grain storage facility, Kenji watched as his agricultural equipment performed its monthly maintenance cycle. To any orbital scanner, the building registered as containing harvesting machinery, irrigation pumps, and seed storage units. The reality was somewhat different. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okafor, the same woman who taught art in Elena's settlement, approached with a datapad. Priority transmission from Earth Central. Full text reads, "Spring planting season may arrive early. Prepare fields for accelerated growth cycle." Kenji nodded slowly. After 3 decades of maintaining this cover, he could translate Earth Central's agricultural metaphors in his sleep. Spring planting season meant preparation for possible conflict. Accelerated growth cycle meant the galaxy's political situation was deteriorating faster than anticipated. Acknowledged. Signal all garden supervisors. I want a full inventory of our cultivation tools. Sarah's fingers moved across the datapad with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, responses began arriving from across human space. To anyone monitoring the communications, they would see routine reports from farming settlements, discussions of seed stocks, equipment maintenance, and harvest projections. The truth was more complex. New Geneva reports full readiness. All cultivation tools operational. Personnel at 100% efficiency. Sarah read from the incoming data. Kepler 442b requests additional fertilizer shipments. They've had some pest problems, but nothing they can't handle. And Admiral Chen sends regards from the frontier worlds. Admiral Chen? Kenji smiled at that. To the galaxy, she was Dr. Maria Chen, a terraforming specialist who helped establish agricultural colonies in marginal star systems. To the Ghost Fleet, she commanded the deep space reconnaissance network that monitored threats far beyond the borders of known space. What's the current assessment from reconnaissance? The Devourer containment is degrading faster than predicted. Admiral Chen estimates perhaps 18 months before they break through the void barrier in significant numbers. The Cathari military is mobilizing, ostensibly for war games. The hegemony has been moving fleet assets to strategic positions around neutral worlds. Kenji walked to what appeared to be a window overlooking wheat fields. In reality, the transparent aluminum panel provided a view of the hidden shipyard below, where vessels that officially didn't exist underwent final preparations. And our diplomatic situation? Deteriorating. Ambassador Sarah reports that at least 7 species are now actively investigating human capabilities. The Cathari have requested access to our historical databases. Which histories are we providing? Ancient Earth conflicts, pre-spaceflight material, nothing that would indicate current capabilities. Kenji was quiet for a moment, watching, as maintenance crews swarmed over the sleek vessels in the concealed hangar below. The ships looked nothing like the utilitarian freighters and research vessels that humanity operated openly. These craft were built for speed, stealth, and lethality, the kind of vessels that could appear anywhere in the galaxy within days and disappear just as quickly. Sarah, how many active Ghost Fleet personnel do we have across all settlements? Approximately 47 million, Admiral. All maintaining civilian covers, all responding to regular training protocols disguised as community activities. 47 million. Kenji still found the number staggering. Nearly 10% of humanity's total population, trained and equipped for operations that the galaxy couldn't even imagine. Teachers who could plot orbital bombardment patterns. Farmers who could coordinate multi-system fleet movements. Doctors who could design biological weapons, or more importantly, design defenses against them. All of them living quiet lives, raising families, contributing to their communities and maintaining the careful fiction that humanity was exactly what it appeared to be. Admiral, Sarah's voice carried a note of concern. There's something else. Ambassador Chen's last transmission included a personal message for you. Oh? She said the Cathari general who questioned her, Rex, was wearing a combat medal from the 7th Galactic War, specifically the Campaign of Tears. Kenji felt his blood turn cold. The Campaign of Tears was classified at levels that most galactic governments didn't even know existed. If Rex had been there, he was more than just a military officer. He was someone who had seen the galaxy's worst nightmares and lived to remember them. How much would someone with that experience know about pre-spaceflight human warfare? More than we'd like, Sarah admitted. Admiral, if he starts connecting historical patterns with current observations, he'll realize that our instinctive responses to threats are actually the result of continuous tactical evolution spanning 3 millennia. Kenji turned from the window. Sarah, initiate Phase 2 of Operation Garden. Sir? Phase 2 is... I know what Phase 2 is, Lieutenant Commander. Activate all secondary networks. Begin transitioning personnel from agricultural duties to operational readiness. And send a message to Admiral Chen. What should the message say? Kenji was quiet for a long moment, considering. Finally, he spoke with the careful precision of someone who understood that words, once transmitted, could not be recalled. Tell her that the gardening season is ending. It's time to prepare the soil for a different kind of crop. 6,000 light years away, on a research station orbiting a dying star, Dr. Maria Chen received the transmission while officially conducting a survey of stellar radiation effects on plant growth. The message was buried in a routine agricultural report, but Maria's eyes picked out the relevant phrases immediately. She was 42 years old, had 3 degrees in stellar engineering, and had published extensively on terraforming techniques. She also commanded a fleet of reconnaissance vessels that operated in regions of space where most species feared to venture. Dr. Chen, her research assistant, Tommy Nguyen, looked up from his sensor readings. The stellar radiation measurements are showing some interesting patterns. Thought you might want to take a look. Tommy was officially a graduate student in astrophysics. Unofficially, he was a commander in the Deep Space Reconnaissance Division, responsible for monitoring devourer activity beyond the void barrier. His research into stellar phenomena was actually an elaborate cover for intelligence-gathering operations. What kind of patterns? Maria asked, though she already suspected what he was going to tell her. Massive gravitational disturbances along the barrier perimeter. Something big is moving out there. Multiple somethings. Maria joined him at the sensor station, studying readings that would have terrified most galactic military commanders. How big? Fleet-sized formations, at least 12 separate groups, each one containing what appears to be several hundred vessels. Devourer. The energy signatures match, but Tommy paused, running the data through analysis programs that officially studied stellar phenomena and unofficially tracked military movements across known space. Dr. Chen, these formations are moving in coordinated patterns, not random expansion, organized reconnaissance. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's life support. The Devourers were an ancient enemy, older than galactic civilization, and they had spent the last 50,000 years contained beyond the void barrier, by a network of automated defense platforms. They were supposed to be mindless consumers, driven by hunger and instinct. Organized reconnaissance suggested something far worse. Tommy, how long before they reach inhabited space? At current rate of advance, 8 months, maybe less. Maria activated her personal communicator and began composing a message. To any monitoring system, it would appear to be a request for additional research funding. Central Agricultural Authority Priority Funding Request. Research station requires enhanced cultivation equipment for extended stellar survey. Project duration estimated 8 to 12 months. Request permission to activate deep field research protocols. The response came within hours. Research funding approved. All necessary cultivation equipment authorized for immediate deployment. Extended survey protocols now active. May your